Thank you for turning to page 121. Today we're going to take a look at the last of the rule books of the AD&D set, specifically the Greyhawk-esque books. I might touch on a few of the other hardcovers that came along, Forgotten Realms Adventures, Dragonlance Adventures. I haven't decided yet. Let me know what you think if I should cover those. I'm a Greyhawk guy. I use elements of both those books, especially Towers of Our Sorcery. I have those in my Greyhawk campaign. But let me know if you're interested in seeing that. But today, the last of the rule books, Unearthed Arcana. Dun, 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 dun. I saved this one for last because honestly, this one's the most controversial. Bad spine and all. So we're going to take a look at Unearthed Arcana. This is my battered copy that I bought in 1985. And I'll show the spine and one of the reasons that people didn't like this book. And I'm going to go into some of the contents and some of the other reasons some people didn't like this book. And I'll let you know how I felt about this book as we go along. So today on page 121, Unearthed Arcana. Unearthed Arcana by Gary Gygax from 1985. I'm going to go ahead and take away some of the suspense right now and tell you I like this book a great deal and I use it all the time in my campaign. There, I said it. I know there are a lot of people that don't care for this book and have blocked it from their campaign. I understand that. To my mind, it didn't change things as much. It kind of gave a definite power boost to D&D. I'm not positive D&D needed it, but that being said, we went with it. So inside, the very first thing I'm going to discuss, there's my little stamp from the club I had been in, is the binding. There we go, perfect example. I don't ever lay my books flat. This one did that for me. I have others that I've bought since that have better bindings, but this is my original copy with the bad binding. That was the main thing that nobody liked about this book. The bindings were horrible. Many of these, one of my players has a copy he still keeps. The pages just fall out as he opens it. Mine's not quite that bad, although it is getting there. And it was like this, by the way, in 1985. It's not like the years did this. The binding did this. So 1985 is kind of a pivotal year in TSR's history. Things were getting a little tight financially. There were some power struggles going on. I'm not going to go into that. The only reason I bring it up here is it definitely, in my opinion, had an effect on this book. This book got published in a hurry, I think in a bid to kind of keep things going at TSR, and I think that's why we have bad bindings too. Because at the same time this was out, the Dragon binding, the stapling had gotten terrible, and the covers fall off of those all the time. So I think we saw a little bit of desperation on the part of TSR. Consequent to that also, a lot of this stuff was not play tested very thoroughly. So as you bought this book, you had to kind of play test this stuff and pick what you wanted and throw out what you didn't want. The good news was a lot of what's in this book, I'll go to the table of contents, this is the players section, a lot of what's in this book had been play tested by us for years. Most of the player character classes that are new in this, and even some of the races, had already seen the light of day in Dragon Magazine from Gygax. And we had already been using barbarians and cavaliers in our campaign. So by the time this book came out, we already had a pretty good established way to run those character classes. And then the subtle changes that came from the Dragon articles to this were not that tough to deal with. And we've adapted a lot of stuff anyway to our campaign, as everybody does. You make your D&D campaign your own. So coming into here, the character races. Uh-oh. Here we go. Controversy number one. Let's get to it. Under the elves, we have the Dark Elves, also known as the Drow. Everyone started running Drow. And Drow bow specialists and Drow scimitar specialists, especially. The scimitar came more with Drizzt Do'Urden coming up in 87. But the Drow two-handed fighter, where they could fight with a hand of the same weapon, single-handed weapon of the same size, one in each hand, became a big, big thing, especially when we get to the weapon specialization, because now you had Drow fighters that would get one attack per hand the first round and 2 attacks per hand the second round, translating to a 2 and a 4 on a first level character. As I said, we had to do some customization and some tinkering with this. One of those was we limited that. I basically let some players play around with that stuff and enjoy it, but when they wanted to go back again, the answer was no. If it was a player who hadn't used it, I said, sure, go ahead. Everybody got to sample it a little bit, but I would not let them be all that was in my campaign. And I was only allowing pretty much one per campaign. And I was pretty rough on those guys. Since they were such damage dealers, I upped the monsters they were facing. We're going to get into weapon specialization in a minute. The other thing I'm going to say about the Dark Elves is the females get all kinds of spells. All Dark Elves have some innate abilities. Once a day they get Dancing Lights, Fairy Fire, and Darkness, 5-foot radius. At 4th level in any class, Dark Elves gain the ability to cast Detect Magic, Know Alignment, and Levitate. Also once a day. Females at 4th level or higher also got Clairvoyance, Detect Lie, Suggestion, and Dispel Magic. And I felt that was unfair. Just as we'd removed strength limits from females, I didn't feel it was fair to limit something to only female characters, so we allow all Dark Elves to gain all those powers upon attaining those levels. So, a little bit of a thing, but it was a change I felt we needed to make. I adopted that very early. We get now into Deep Gnomes. Interesting, we have a couple of Deep Gnomes still active in my campaign. They got the special magic spells, spell-like abilities, blindness, blur, and change self. And it's interesting. They could also deal with the earth elementals and things. I've never found this character class to be that big a deal. They have a hard time being on the surface, just like Drow. So I never really had a problem with this character class. So now we're going to go over to, we got some more of the tables and who can be what based on race. And now we come to the character classes. We start with the Cavalier. Cavalier had been around since about 1982 in Dragon Magazine. I want to say about issue 72. I'll take a look at that down the line. But the Cavalier, as written here, it's not that big a deal. About the biggest thing is if you had the highest dex you could have, you would end up with about 17 hit points at 1st level, depending on how you went up, because you could start as a 0-level Cavalier. We didn't really bother with that much. We usually just did the 1 die plus 3. And the 12-sided die was a typo. It was supposed to be a 10-sided die. Dragon 104, I think, did the errata for this book, and it was extensive. Again, another sign that this was rushed to press to grab cash. And then we come down to the Druids. The Druids was kind of neat because it expanded Druids past 15th level, brought Druids all the way up to 23rd level, and they gained a bunch of other powers. Breathed a lot of life into Druids, and I actually approved of this a great deal. And then we come to weapon specialization for fighters. Yeah, weapon specialization, probably the main thing this book is controversial for. If you double specialize with a longsword, your fighter at 1st level gets an additional +3/+3. And you can double specialize in anything. I'm just using the longsword because that's kind of the baseline weapon in D&D. So an additional +3 to +3, and if you have that guy who's rolled like an 1870 strength, he's +2/+4. So now you have a guy who's running around at +5/+7 at 1st level. That's hard to deal with. One of the ways we dealt with it was we set up that you could only take single specialization at 1st level and get double specialization at 3rd. And even in some campaigns, I've limited double specialization to 5th. That did help mitigate it a little bit. The main thing that bothered me about weapon specialization is it took away probably my favorite low-level monster in the game, as written in the book, which is the Orc. I love Orcs. I've used them since I started playing D&D. And I couldn't really put Orcs out anymore because I had fighters that were 1-shot, 1-kill. No matter how many hit points an Orc had, at 1 hit dice, the most hit points it could have is 8. And you've got a fighter potentially that's going to be doing a minimum of 6 or 7. Disappointing. We'd always had Uruk-hai. Yeah, I've read Tolkien. We had Uruk-hai in our campaign from the very earliest days. So I just made multi-hit dice Orcs. But I still mourn the loss to this day of my good old friend, 1-hit dice Orcs. But, oh well. The other part of this that was really kind of brutal was bow specialization. Bow specialists are really, they can change your campaign and they can change it in a hurry. When you get the weapon specialization for a bow, you get a point blank category of 6 feet to 30 feet. Within that, you are +2 to hit and damage. And you are double damage with the arrow. So that's a die 6 +2 doubled. So without any other kind of consideration, you are +2 attack, and within 30 feet, a die 6 +2 doubled, which could be 16 points of damage. And you could do that twice in a round, 3 if you had an arrow knocked. Very powerful for very low level characters. Still powerful even into around 10th, 12th level. Both specializations is one of those things I've had to just kind of learn to deal with. And again, just like the other specializations, I limit my campaign. And there have been campaigns where I've just flat said, no, no bow specialists. Bow specialists tend to kind of be combat hogs. And I'm not crazy about that. We do allow, by the way, missile fire into combat. You have to roll it to hit. If you hit armor normally, that's fine. You hit the opponent, the guy you were aiming for. If you roll a natural 1, you automatically hit your partner, the guy who was in the fight that you were trying to help out, and you automatically deal maximum damage. So for a bow specialist firing in, he could be rolling 16, or he will be doing 16 points if he throws a 1. Well, that's unfortunate for the fighter he hit, who's probably dropped at first level, or is dropped at first level. It's really more unfortunate for the bow specialist, who then has the rest of the party get mad at him. So there are some ways to deal with it. Bow specialization continues to be vexing. I allow it in my campaign. I just have to kind of sit on it as a DM. Coming to the Barbarian. The Barbarian, oh my gosh, who didn't have a Barbarian? This had been in Dragon Magazine earlier too, so they were already out there. Who didn't have a Barbarian in their campaign prior to this? Once this book came out, everyone wanted to be a Barbarian until they found out, look at their progression, and you can't take magic items. They're really slow to progress, and they get really boring fast. I didn't have much of a problem with Barbarians after the first year or so that this book was in use, simply because people found they weren't all that good. Coming over to the Ranger. We get tracking by level in Ranger. Yay! This was something that was needed early on. I was excited to get this for Rangers, and some details on how they track indoor and outdoor, modifiers to tracking, things like that. I liked this. And then we get the Thief Acrobat. Yes. Well, actually, before I go to that, we've expanded the giant class opponents for Rangers. Interesting. Some creatures on here like Zvart that I probably wouldn't have thought of to put on here. Certainly wouldn't have thought of Orc as giant class. But what the heck. So there you have it. Now we come to the Thief Acrobat. Gord the Rogue. If you've seen the videos I've been doing or you read the books, you know Gord is the Thief Acrobat. Gary Gygax was very excited about this campaign, or this addition to the campaign. The idea of kind of a split class, and some split classes pop up in Oriental Adventures, which is also published in '85. Tried a Thief Acrobat, was real excited about it, went ahead and got my Thief up to 5th level, and then with the DM's permission, split into a Thief Acrobat, and found out that you really don't gain much. In fact, you lose more than you gain, in my opinion. Being able to pole vault and broad jump, tumble, things like that, they don't translate well to D&D combat. You had a stoppage of your thief skills at this level for it. It's, in my opinion, not worth it. And I have one other player who has left our campaign. He tried it, and he wasn't happy with it either. So this one doesn't see much use in our campaign. So going on, we have the weapon adjustment tables, which you've never used. I've never used in my campaign. And we come to the spells. I like the expansion of spells in this book. I like a lot of the spells this book added. Again, many of these, here's where a buddy of mine spilled a beer on my page. This book, a lot of the spells had already been previewed in Dragon Magazine, so we were familiar with a lot of these, and had already made house rulings for ones that needed it. Cleric spells added some, not a ton. Wow, he really got this. Meld into Stone is kind of an interesting one. Remove Paralysis for a 3rd level spell, I kind of didn't really get. But you gain a little bit. I liked Airwalk, which was a nice spell. Rainbow Spike Growth, I did like. That still appears in our campaign a lot. And then we get down to Forbiddance and Hero's Feast. Succor is a spell I do like. So I wasn't blown away by the Cleric spells in this. The Druid spell is pretty interesting. You get Ceremony, which is multiple Druids together, and then you get Goodberry, which was a very important one, and still is. Some nice healing that you can get. The Goodberries, you pop them, you get 1 point of healing. You get Spike Growth again. Some other interesting ones here. Sunray is a good one against Undead. And now we come to the magic user spells. This was an area that caused some controversy. I'm going to start with the cantrips. Cantrips didn't see a ton of use in our campaign. You get 4 cantrips for 1 first level spell slot, which is a pretty good deal, but the cantrips don't do much of anything. They don't see a lot of use in our game. We come to the first level spells. The main one that caused controversy was armor. When we first read this spell in Dragon Magazine before Unearthed Arcana was published, many of us misinterpreted the way the spell is removed. You get the spell and it gives you either armor class 8 or +1 to armor class, +1 to saving throw, if you're already greater than armor class 8 for some reason. But it also lasts until damage inflicted equals 8 + 1 per level, so 9 for first level MU. Well, that's all well and good, but for the spell to be dispelled, a magic user at first level has a maximum with a 16 con of 6 hit points. That same magic user would have to be -3 in order to lose the spell. A lot of us misinterpreted that and thought that it meant that you got phantom armor points, phantom hit points for an armor spell, equaling 8 + 1 per level. Many of us chose to keep that misinterpretation even after the errata was published in Dragon Magazine. We still use it this way. An armor spell is worth 8 + 1 per level phantom hit points. It keeps the MUs on the table longer and makes the entire class more viable. I don't always grant armor as a first level spell the player knows. Sometimes they have to look for it, but it's a good spell and I like the way we use it. So a happy accident, as Bob Ross used to say. So we come to Mount. Mount is a very good spell. I especially like the idea of whipping up an elephant with a howdah at 18th level. It sees some use, especially at lower levels. You're coming to second level spells. Bind is a great spell. No saving throw allowed, and it acts with a rope of entanglement. Makes a regular length of rope very dangerous. And then Melf's Acid Arrow, which could have been great, but didn't really land. Vocalize is a good one. You can cast spells even in silence. And then we come to the third level, where we get a couple of good ones here. Item is a real good one. You take on any item and turn it into a piece of cloth. I had a game a few years ago. The players were traveling as part of an army. They used an item spell to turn some of the siege weapons, the catapults and trebuchets, into cloth. Carried them in their pockets, made the going much faster, and then got them out of the item spell when they arrived at their destination. Over to Sepia Snake Sigil. Oh, wow, what a controversial spell this is. In this version, you can draw the sigil on something like a spell book, or in the air, or you can cast it at someone. If they are hit by it, as in you roll their armor class as a magic user of your level, and once they are hit, there is no saving throw, they're just put into a force field of suspended animation. I know this spell was flat out banned by a lot of groups. We actually didn't. I limit its use. I make the players adhere to where they put it. So if they put it on their book and someone else opens the book, guess what? They're hit by the sigil. I like this spell, and we use this spell a lot in our campaign. So coming down to Evard's Black Tentacles in 4th level, that's a very good spell. I like that a bunch. Shout is a good spell. And then Stone Skin. Stone Skin, it protects you against any attack by cut, blow, projectile, or the like. Even a rock thrown by a giant would be protected. I do have people get knocked down for that. We allow Stone Skin. You can only ever have one on at a time. And it doesn't affect your movement as it did in the second level version of this spell, where it slowed you down a little bit. And it will deflect one attack, but one attack only. In the second level version, I believe it attacks an entire attack sequence. In this case, if you're fighting a fighter that gets 2 swings in a round, if he hits with the first, it's deflected off the Stone Skin, always denoted at our table by ting. And then his second sword strike, if he rolled his armor class, the necessary armor class to hit, would then land. So we only allow this to stop one sword blow. And as we found out in Wilderness Survival Guide, Stone Skin can be removed by hailstones. Ultravision, another controversial spell in this book. It grants night vision. In this iteration, only usable above ground in a starry night, that kind of thing. We actually let Ultravision, we always played it as what is third edition dark vision. I prefer it that way. So if you have Ultravision, you can see in the dark. Very powerful in our game. 5th level Avoidance, pretty good spell. Dismissal, Dollar. A lot of these appeared in Dragon Magazine, had to do with casting nether creatures and then controlling them or getting rid of them. Interesting. We haven't used those a bunch. Chain Lightning, a 6th level spell. That gets used a lot. That can slow a game down, unfortunately, because the lightning bolt bounces from target to target. But remember, it also bounces to inanimate objects or even the wall. So it's possible you'll use up a few of the strikes on inanimate objects that won't be affected by anything. The Chain Lightning works that if you are 12th level, minimum level to cast the spell, your first hit is 12 dice 6. I have the player roll the dice, and then the Chain Lightning will leap to somebody else or something else nearby. I roll that randomly, and now you take out the highest die, and it's 11 dice. And it leaps again, 10 dice. I remove the highest dice as we continue down. Each time, each target gets hit, they make a saving throw for half damage. It's a nice spell. It can slow the game down a little bit, but if you do the way I just described, it goes pretty darn quick. Contingency, a really nice spell. Bring up spells if something negative happens. One famous one that I used this for was I had an armor spell that would pop up if I was ever reduced to 50% hit points. It described it as life energy or something like that to the DM, but he allowed it. Ensnarement, Eye Bite, both are summoning spells. Transmute water to dust. 7th level spells, we come into Banishment. Force Cage is actually pretty sweet. Force Cage does see quite a bit of use in our campaign. I recommend it. Mordenkainen's Magnificent Mansion, as the players get to be higher level and want to sleep the night away in comfort. That's a good one. Teleport Without Error, very popular in our campaign. Then we come down to Torment, True Name, a couple others. Volley, we never really used. Binding, another extraplanar creature type thing. Autoluke's Telekinetic Sphere, Crystal Brittle, that's pretty good. Turns metal to something that's really brittle. Energy Drain is good. Mordenkainen's Disjunction. Sorry, Craig. I hit Craig's character with this 30 years ago. He failed his saving throw and then failed on all his key items. He stopped playing the character. I'm sorry. There you go. Public apology. I've never done that again. It's a great spell for you to have to throw on an opponent, especially an opponent MU. And then Succor is a nice spell because you can set it up where somebody can summon you or you can summon someone else to your aid. Then we come to Illusionist spells. Again, we have cantrips. Again, not real crazy about it. Chromatic Orb, very nice spell. I like that spell a lot. Phantom Armor, not as good as the armor spell, but it does drop you to AC 3, which is pretty sweet. And then we get a couple other spells here. I was not blown away by a lot of these. The best one out of these, in my opinion, is Wraith Form, which is only a 3rd level spell, where you become insubstantial, ghost-like, if you will. I've seen this used to very good effect to impersonate a ghost in one game, or to just pass through doors and walls. Vacancy is a nice illusion, makes an occupied room look empty. And then we keep going. We get down to Magic Mirror, which is good. Tempest Fugit, Death Fog. Again, a lot of not play-tested items in this book. Some of these are kind of weird, or the utility is limited. And now we come to our Unearthed Arcana Dungeon Master section. You've heard my opinion on Dungeon Master sections before. I think they're for everybody, but if you're a player and you don't want to go any further, then stop now. This is pretty nice because it gave us new types of armor, among other things. Gave us Elfin Chainmail, which was very important in our campaign. Field Plate and Full Plate, which have been explored under the Cavalier in Dragon Magazine. Gave you the followers for Cavaliers, Henchmen, and then Warhorses and Barding, and different types of weapons, including a lasso, and then types of spellbooks. This was good information on spellbooks. We didn't have a ton at the time. And then how to cast illusionist spells, how to acquire illusionist spells, and then some spell explanation expansion like the Dungeon Master Guide had. And then your social class and rank. We use this a bit. It's kind of fun. Actually found out that one of our characters, a bard, was from a farm, and I was able to actually roll in his family farm into one of my adventures. It was a fun game. Onkegs were plaguing the area and eating people and livestock from surrounding farms. For whatever reason, they weren't bothering the player character's family farm. Well, upon investigating, they found out the Onkeg's nest was directly below the player character's family farm, and they didn't want to poop where they ate, so they didn't mess with that farm, but they decimated the surrounding farms. Made for a good campaign. Went about 3 or 4 parts. So now we come down to the new magic items, and these are combined magic tables. These are better than what's in Dungeon Master Guide because they combine the DMG stuff with the new stuff from Unearthed Arcana. There we are laying flat again on page 88 to 89. Breaks my heart a little bit. Here we go with a bunch of new potions and oils. These were pretty interesting. I use these all the time. I use the magic items in here. Ring of Bocob is very popular with us. Ring of Mind Shielding. I actually made this where it will protect you against Power Blast and things like that. Psionic Blast gaining +1. I made that a +2 saving throw. And if -3 damage, if you possess psionics, I changed that to a +2 saving throw, -2 damage versus any kind of psionic Power Blast. Now, I don't use psionics in my game. The mental manifests itself as magic. Ring of Fairy, very popular. You get the various ancillary powers of an elf. I've actually done Ring of Drow also. That's also in the Encyclopedia Magica. Here we go, new rods. Rod of Passage, Rod of Alertness, both very powerful. Rod of Flailing. Just some really good magic items in here. And again, I know a lot of people don't do any stuff out of here. They felt that this book unbalanced AD&D, and they just decided to stop with the early books and not include this one. And that's fine. That's their prerogative. I feel that any source of material for D&D is good, and it's up to the DM to balance it and make it fun. The most important part of that being make it fun. That said, I use this book commonly in my game. My players have copies of it sitting with them. I've always encouraged my players to have their Player's Handbook, DMG, and Unearthed Arcana with them. If they don't have them handy, I'll happily pass them my copy that I always have. It's just, to me, it's just how you play the game. Coming down to the Weaponless Combat Appendix. I tried this, it doesn't work too well. Non-lethal combat, where you kind of just swat them with your edge of your sword. I've done a little bit of that. We come down to the non-human deities. A lot of these were explored in Dragon Magazine. They're brought in here to make them kind of official and kind of Greyhawk, which is pretty cool. Nice little write-ups on all of these. I'm going to cover these as I go through the Dragon articles. So I'm not going to spend a bunch of time here on these guys. There was a ton of excitement when this book came out. And I want to say it came out in late July or early August of '85, right before Gen Con. Ran out and bought several copies because I was the guy that got off of work first the day it came out. And ran to the local gaming store, and I bought, I believe, 3 copies. One for myself, one for my then-girlfriend, now wife, and one for a buddy of mine. Because they were both working and wouldn't be able to get them until later. Here we get pictures of various pole arms, which is pretty neat. I like this because, again, pre-internet, I didn't know what some of these looked like. I knew what a poleaxe was, but I didn't know specifics. So, a glaive, all kinds of billhook. These are pretty sweet. And then afterward in the credits. So 128 pages of controversial fun. That is Unearthed Arcana. I'll say it again. I love this book. I use this book all the time, unashamedly. If you sit at my DM's table, if I'm DMing you, then yes, we are using Unearthed Arcana. I don't hold anything against anybody who doesn't use this book. And of course, I modify a bunch of stuff out of this book. I expect everybody to modify stuff out of everything they play. But I don't have a lot of the dislike for this book that some people have. And like I said, I can understand at an intellectual level. For me, a D&D book is a D&D book, and I'll take this one as a win. So that's all I've got today for page 121. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. If you liked what you heard and saw, please subscribe, tell your friends, and I'll see you next time.